Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's Access to the Information, Access to the Source. My name is Andrea Sitzes, and I serve as President and CEO for Show Me Christian County. We serve as the economic development organization representing this area, and we're looking forward to digging in today into some reopening information and also looking at some consumer trends. Now that data is becoming available for what's been happening and how people have been spending their money over this COVID-19 crisis, I think it's really valuable information to look at how that has impacted various industries and how that's going to impact us moving forward. So some quick housekeeping items. If you have questions throughout the webinar, of course, you can submit those through Zoom chat or also through Facebook Live. Sarah Lawson, our project coordinator, will be monitoring our questions, and we will get to our questions at the end. And without further ado, we're going to jump in and get started. So today, just to kind of go through the agenda and the information that we're going to be covering, as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at consumer spending through COVID-19, not just for Missouri, but also comparing Missouri to some other key states that relate to us either in population or from their reopening statistics. Also, various industry impacts. We're going to be looking at the grocery industry, transportation, restaurants and entertainment, and different things as we've moved through this crisis. Initial trends from states that reopened a little bit earlier, specifically Oklahoma and Georgia. Those are two states that reopened just slightly earlier than everyone else and started to give us metrics on consumer habits through some mobile device data and what we can maybe look for as far as trends as we continue to reopen. Local trends and business feedback that we've gotten from a survey that's been done here through Show Me Christian County and also through our chamber partners, and we're very grateful for their assistance in that. And so we'll cover some local trends and what our businesses are saying here, and also what our job postings look like. As we know, we are in an unprecedented time for our unemployment rate, and what our job postings looking like in various industries, and also upcoming topics as we kind of round out the month of May. So as we get started, this first map is from a report done by the National Association of Counties. And this was specifically looking at the sales tax revenue and how it has dropped with non-essential businesses as they've been shuttered due to the coronavirus. As you look at this, there are some states that are a little darker blue than others, and that is because they are more heavily dependent on sales tax. As a matter of fact, as outlined by that report, there were 5 states that were identified as increasingly dependent on sales tax, and that was, of course, Missouri, then our neighboring states of Oklahoma and Arkansas, Georgia, and also New York. And as we know, New York is a hot zone, and so that's definitely an extreme example. And so we will be looking specifically at, as I mentioned, Georgia and Oklahoma, as they are also heavily dependent on sales tax and what their reopening patterns are doing and how we see that moving forward. But first, I want to look at how Missouri compares to the states of Tennessee and Indiana, specifically because these states are very similar to Missouri as far as our population and household income. You'll see Missouri has a population of about 6.137 million individuals, whereas Tennessee has 6.829 million and Indiana 6.732. So all right there, pretty even. Our median household income is $53,578, and then Tennessee is slightly lower at $51,000, whereas Indiana is slightly higher. Then our stay-at-home orders and how those have been similar or changed. You'll see Indiana was the first state to go into a stay-at-home order out of these 3 and lifted theirs at the same time that Missouri did. So really being under those orders from March 24th into the early days of May. Then Tennessee was next, starting theirs at the very end of the month of March and opened theirs just slightly earlier than we did. And then, of course, as we all know, we were under an official stay-at-home order from the governor of Missouri from April 6th through the midnight hours of May 3rd. And then it's total cases. This is going to be something that I believe heavily impacts how our economies will recover. And this has really been in analyzing this data and also the mobile trends and mobile device data that we're seeing from those other states. So we're going to look at total number of cases and how that may be impacting these consumer spending numbers. The highest of these three has been Indiana, and they, as of last night, had 24,627 cases. Now, those have been all recorded cases, so this does not break down the number of those that are active, that just the number of total recorded. Tennessee also has more than the state of Missouri, 16,111, and then Missouri, as of last night, had 9,918 recorded cases. So this data and a lot of the information we're going to be moving forward in is based off of this website, opportunityinsights.org. This Opportunity Insights database has really pulled together some valuable information, and there are various different entities that contribute to this, and we found it to be a great source of information. So as you see the numbers here, Missouri is going to be this blue line, Tennessee is kind of the pink line that's there, and Indiana teal, as the corresponding colors were on the previous slide. And as we had them listed left to right, that's very true in how the data reads. Again, not sure what has contributed to this, but we are seeing some trends that the lower the number of cases, potentially it indicates the better that your economy performs. So this is in total consumer spending and what we have seen. The very baseline of this and this metric began in early January. And then you'll start to see here on all of the slides that we're going to look at that follow this similar trend, you'll note here that March 20th was the date that public schools closed across the state of Missouri. April 6th was when the stay-at-home order was enacted. April 13th is when the stimulus payments began from the CARES Act. And then we saw a little bit of upward trend there at the end of April. March 3rd, of course, is when our stay-at-home order expired, and the data is available through the end of April at this point in time. So in looking at this total consumer spending for these three states, Tennessee is currently, or was at the end of April, about 5.9% lower than early January. So that's a great indicator. Missouri is also faring very well and less than 20% down from where we saw it in January. So you'll see we definitely had some significant dips in our consumer spending, especially in those early weeks of late March into early April when people were very fearful of the virus. And then we've started to see a gradual increase in trend in this consumer spending as people have begun to learn how to adapt, either through PPE or other mechanisms of how they're spending their resources. Indiana is unfortunately really suffering through this crisis. And again, as we look at all of these states, I think that that has a direct correlation to a higher number of cases. There are definitely states, and we're going to look at one particularly that has a higher number of cases, but again, always important information to note. So as we start to break down this total consumer spending into various industries, again, the trend lines are very similar, but I wanted to break this down for all of our businesses here in Christian County. We have a very diverse economy, and that's one thing that really allowed us to really ride out the Great Recession through 08 and 09 very well, because not all of our eggs were in one basket, so to speak. So when we look at the category of apparel and general merchandise, again, this is as a state, our county specific information by sector is not yet available, and we will hope to bring that to you as soon as it is. So when you look at total categories, Tennessee, -7% from early January. Missouri is about 25% down as a whole, and then Indiana, 39.3%. As we move on into entertainment and recreation, as we know, especially with the stay-at-home orders limiting those that were non-essential based on those ordinances or orders, that heavily impacted entertainment and recreation, as well as hospitality, which we'll also cover. So this is a sector that is definitely stronger hit on this trend. As of the time of this report, Missouri was down 73.8% in entertainment and recreation, and we're seeing a lot of those jobs in entertainment and hospitality where a bulk of the unemployment rates are coming from. Indiana is -80%, and then Tennessee with their sector, and of course a very large tourism corridor, is right at -70%, hovering just above that line. For groceries, as we've all seen, rush to the store. Of course, we all knew that, toilet paper was one of those things, hot commodities, shelf-stable foods, and you really saw that spike happen right at the middle of March. And so we've actually seen these categories increase, and they are overperforming, again, because some of our other sectors are closed down or still rebounding. So for our grocery sectors, Tennessee is performing higher at this point, whereas you'll notice that Missouri actually peaked highest out of all of these states. And so at one point in time on March 18th, which was really as things started to heat up here in the state of Missouri, we actually saw a positive 72.4% increase in this sector. And that's as people were preparing to stay home. So you'll see this trend again kind of flatten out, but right now this is a sector that is very strong as people are getting all of those resources and staying indoors. Healthcare is another sector that's very important to Christian County. Being so close to Greene County and the healthcare that's here in our region, this is a vital indicator because a majority of our residents are employed in this sector. So when you look at the impacts of COVID and how this has hit, we are currently about 47% lower than we were in January. And again, this is some of those non-essential services and other clinics and things that are now beginning to reopen. Indiana is negative 61.8%, and Tennessee is negative 35.8%. So it really has been interesting. The trend lines have stayed very similar throughout these industries as far as how all of these three states are performing, being very equal. Another very hard hit category was restaurants and hotels. And so when you look at our neighbors to the south, and we'll cover that here in a little bit, Taney County, of course, with their hospitality market was severely impacted through COVID-19. And there are things that we can do locally as we start to reopen to safely practice some local tourism and helping our regional economy bounce back. But when we look at this market as a whole, of course, here in our service corridor, we've seen the state of Missouri at negative 55.2% from where we were in January. And we're starting to see that trend line increase as people are, of course, getting back out and moving about in the economy. Tennessee, negative 38.1%, and Indiana, negative 68.6%. This is a space where we've really seen some of our restaurant partners and food and beverage sectors across the county be very innovative and creative. The majority of you that have stayed open offered the curbside home delivery, bulk things as far as grocery type items, mini markets were popping up all across the county, and also family bulk meals. And there are things that we've been hearing from some of our business owners that will stay and adapt. And so I think there are definitely some positive things, at least from an active learning perspective, that have come out of this for those sectors. Transportation was definitely among those hardest hit. And when you look at the articles and things about oil prices, naturally, as people have stayed home, it impacted the transportation sector. And so these are how the trend lines have fared for all of these three states. Very equal compared to some other statistics and other sectors that we've just looked at. So when you look at Tennessee at negative 65.9%, the U.S. as a whole is down 69.2%. That's the gray line that you've seen throughout all of these graphs. And then Missouri is right at 70% decrease, and Indiana negative 78.1%. So again, these are things that will start to increase as we open up the economy. So when you look at this graph, this is total consumer spending based against two very specific sectors that we just looked at. And this is for all of Missouri as a whole. So on this graph, the blue line represents our total consumer spending. Our healthcare is the teal graph or turquoise, and then our restaurants and hotels are there as the pink graph. And I specifically looked at these because these are industries that are very important to our region as a whole and also employ a lot of our individuals. We are largely service-based, and while service might mean different things to different people and business owners, this is a good snapshot of how those trends are leading. So all in all, we've seen that down. You can see in the light gray lines there, of course, the spike at the top with the grocery industry. The transportation is even lower than hospitality, but I think this gives us a really good read into how these industries have performed. So next I want to move into that reopening data that we mentioned. So when you look at Missouri, we had the same information on the previous slide compared to Indiana and Tennessee. Now I want to look at how Missouri has been faring compared to Georgia and Oklahoma. And as I mentioned, both of these states began their reopening process on April 24th. Georgia has a larger total population than Missouri of 10.62 million, whereas their median household income is pretty in line with ours. So as far as available dollars to spend in the economy, it's a pretty good read state to state. Their stay-at-home order officially was through April 3rd and officially expired as a whole on April 30th, while they did allow things like barbershops, salons, tattoo parlors, gyms, fitness centers, different things like that to reopen on April 24th. Their total cases are the highest that we will look at today as far as the states that we're comparing to, and that will be a very important metric to keep in mind. As of last night, they had reported 34,165 cases. Automatically, you can see Missouri and Georgia have a very large difference when it comes to our number of total active cases. And this is important because it really weighs into how our residents and how our citizens feel about this virus. What's their comfort level as far as spending, as far as moving out and about in public. And of course, the cases, as in Missouri, have also been heavily concentrated to their metro areas. And so Atlanta, of course, very hard hit in Georgia, whereas Kansas City and then St. Louis is currently the hardest hit area in Missouri. Next, we want to look at Oklahoma, our neighbor to the west. I've joked often that Christian County looks like the state of Oklahoma. And so I think this is important as well because they reopened again beginning on April 24th. They have about half the population, little over half than Missouri does as a whole, with 3.957 million total residents in the state. Their median household income is lower than we see by about $3,000, and their stay-at-home order also began at the beginning of April. Again, to go back to one of our very first slides, Georgia and Oklahoma were also identified along with Arkansas and New York and Missouri as one of those 5 states heavily dependent on sales tax. So how these states responded and how that will go into their government and their local economies is a big factor. The state of Oklahoma, while they have a lower population, they have seen less than half of the cases of the state of Missouri as well. So as of last night, they had less than 5,000 cases reported. 4,732 was the number at the time of this report. So as we move into their consumer spending, the teal line is the state of Oklahoma, the dark blue line is Missouri, and then Georgia is the pink line that we'll see there. So when you look at our total consumer spending, I thought that it was important to note, while the markers on the bottom are still the metrics and the defining moments from our state's COVID history and recent timeline, the yellow highlighted area is that April 24th date. And so that is the point in time at which those 2 states began to reopen. It's important to note that because the mobile device data that we're going to be looking at also overlaps with the data that we have for actual consumer spending. So we can see how those 2 metrics are trending and the differences. So you'll notice here, again, lower number of cases shows that there's a stronger confidence in the economy. Oklahoma had less than 5,000 cases. At the date of their reopening, they continued to see that upward trend, whereas Georgia, when they reopened, because they have a higher number of cases, I believe is a direct correlation to their line staying fairly flat for those first few days. It's also important to note in this consumer confidence how that impacts the days leading up to the reopening. And we saw this, all 3 of our states did. We really kind of hit that low point about the middle of April as things really bottomed out for a couple weeks between the end of March and the middle of April. And then gradual consumer confidence started to increase. And you can see that directly by the dollars that were being spent. So as we continue to climb out of this, this marker here is when the original stay-at-home orders were set to expire for Missouri. And then we did see that increase. So there was, again, I believe, kind of a dip in consumer confidence after those orders were extended. And then here, this line, these early May numbers are not yet available. But then we started to see this upward trend heading into May, when, of course, our order did in fact expire. So mobile device data. The mobile device data was gathered from a resource in the retail industry called Buxton. And they are specifically a retail recruitment. They also help retail patterns, and they put out some webinars that and are still going, looking at these trends on how consumers are moving. Again, I found this really valuable because as we look at the similarities for how consumers are spending their money and who's traveling, that will really give us some good indicators. So while the graphs may be grainy, I want to break that down for you and what this has meant to other states that have reopened. So when you look at the state of Georgia, between the dates of April 24th and May 3rd, they took two snapshots in this report, specifically looking at salons and restaurants. Very two sectors where you really have to be very close to other humans and what potential confidence will do to spending. So when you look at salons, they saw a 22.7% increase in the mobile data. Now, this was not in their spending, this was in how consumers were moving about, and they were able to track this information based on the individual mobile IP data that we have, and then really looking at those from a geofence perspective on over 4 million businesses that they have geofenced throughout the nation. Then when you look at restaurants, the state of Georgia had a 24.5% increase in mobile data. So Georgia was very interesting to me because while it's very clear that their mobile devices were moving and that people were getting out, they were still very cautious and holding on to their cash, as we saw in the previous slide, and their consumer spending being fairly flat for those first few days. Then when you look at Oklahoma, their numbers translated to a higher rate of spending. And I believe, at least from early data analytics, that Missouri is really on course. And especially here in our county, we are definitely on course to respond the way that the state of Oklahoma has. So in those first few days, 20.3% of salons increased in their mobile data and who they saw coming into their doors. And restaurants saw a 25.5% increase. This is a 10-day snapshot. So they saw, especially in our restaurant sector, very heavily hit here, a 25% increase in both of those states, which I think is a really good indicator that people are starting to get out again into the economy. I did want to note the metros. And so this is where being in a smaller metro market really helps us when it comes to bouncing back from the COVID crisis. In Georgia, specifically in the salons, while there were 22.7% increase in mobile data, Atlanta adversely only saw a 4.2% increase in that. I'm sure that has increased from the time that this report was done, but I thought that was very telling. So it really spoke to the fact that how an area has been hit or impacted really heavily dictates the consumer confidence and what we can see as our businesses start to reopen. So who's moving? This was again from the Buxton report, and I found this very interesting. This is a consumer profile that was done in the Buxton report, and one that really stood out to them, and I think it's also very applicable to us here in Christian County. So this is a consumer profile of William and Barbara. They're in their autumn years, and they are well established, a mature couple living here in Christian County. We see a lot of these individuals that have moved into our community because their grandkids are here. And so this is very much their community. Head of household age between 66 and 75. And so it was very unique that this population by a lot of the medical community has been deemed as higher risk, yet they are moving and they are spending their money. So that's definitely, I think, a cause to the fact that they were potentially not as heavily impacted by this crisis. This community or this segment of our population has their savings from retirement and different things, and we're not as heavily impacted from unemployment. So when you continue to look down, a lot of the key features here, rural living, we are really seeing that from the metrics and the trends that people want to get back to suburban communities. They want their space. And I think we will only continue to see this increase here in Christian County. We were already a very hot community for people moving to the state of Missouri, and I think COVID will really magnify that for us. So we really need to be prepared. Again, this segment of our population has strong community roots, strong financial savings most of the time, AARP members, financially secure, and outdoor hobbies. Again, very relative to a lot of the residents that we do see here in Christian County, which I think is a strong metric, because as we look at our population and our breakdown from a demographic standpoint, not only do we have these families, but they will be able to get out and spend their money. Once they do, and they can encourage their family members as well that might be younger, having children, that yes, it is in fact safe. Our businesses have done everything that they need to do as far as preparing for PPE, social distancing, different things, and increase that consumer confidence, which translates to dollars spent. So when you look at our county specifically, this is total consumer spending, and this is back to that opportunity insights metric. This, as far as a total, is the only information that's available at this point in time on a county level, and it will be further months until we even have that down to the city level as far as those sales tax numbers. Sales tax numbers and reporting are always a couple months behind, so we will be into June and July before we really are starting to see how consumer spending has impacted our local municipalities. We've seen, as a whole, where we sit right now, Taney County has seen a big resurgence in their local population and spending. And so that's very encouraging, because again, when we look at unemployment across the entire state, our region is one of the heaviest hit from Taney County's perspective. So their consumer spending had bounced back to negative 11.4%. And again, this is compared to early January. Christian County, we were at 21.7% at the time of this report, and Greene County is slightly below us at 25.8%. We reached a couple interesting peaks on this report that I wanted to note for you. So as we look at different metrics, on the 20th, that was the date that our schools closed. Here, our schools, again, one of the largest reasons that people move into the county, specifically in our northern corridor, but really all across the county. And so consumer spending and how this was impacting us to that date. You'll see, as we are the dark blue line, that we did hit a valley a little bit earlier in March, and that we were, at the date that schools closed, about 7.3% down from where we were in January. Then as we've reached some of those same low points, we saw our highest peak to date on April 24th, which, as you'll recall from a few slides before, that was the same date that we saw reopening in those states of Oklahoma and Georgia. I really think that that is a big key factor in the consumer confidence that's here. People were excited about the prospect of other things reopening, and therefore they were spending their money. Then again, because those orders got extended, we did see a lull, but this bounced back. So you'll see that we have a slight decline there after the 24th, but that we are now on an upward trend as far as the actual county and total consumer spending. So how does that translate to our small businesses? The number of hourly employees across the entire state has been noted as down 40.4%. A small business is noted as anything that's less than 100 employees for the purpose of this graph. And in our case, 65% of the businesses in Christian County have less than 15 employees. So this is an important metric for us to pay attention to. So what are our businesses here in the county saying? This report is a survey that we've done from direct response through Show Me Christian County, and we've also sent this out through our chamber network. At this point in time, we've received significantly a higher response rate from one sector of our community, and we're hoping to actively work with our other partners to increase the responses and make sure that we have a good reading from all across the county. So at this point in time, looking at these readings, there are 3 basic measurements that I wanted to highlight for you today. The first was the question, has your business experienced any losses due to COVID-19? I think, the first thought for all of us is yes, of course, but it's actually only about 85%. And while that is a significant majority, the larger businesses, and we've talked to several of our key employers here across the county that are actually busier now than they said they were before. Again, a testament to the fact that we have a very diversified economy. And those businesses and their employees will help us as we start to climb out of this, much like we saw in the Great Recession. Then when you look at the question of how concerned are you about financial impacts to your business over the next 30 days to 6 months. There are 3 different keys here: the next 30 days, 3 months, and then 6 months. You'll see that the number of individuals that say that they are very concerned climbs into that 6 month. And that's really a testament to the fact that while the initial demand is climbing back, first we saw the supply shock and everything being closed down, and now we will see through impacts the demand shock on those as they again start to come back out. And ways that you can kind of bulletproof your business and get the information out there on how you are personally responding to COVID through social distancing, through PPE available to your customers will help really bounce back that demand for your specific business. So as we look 6 months down the road, we are getting this information to our key decision makers across the county on what resources can we explore to increase capital resources for our businesses here in the county. On a very positive note, when we look at those that say, yes, they have capital concerns, but the same question on how concerned are you that your business or organization may close permanently in the next 6 months, we had less than 10% of our respondents say that they were very concerned that they would not survive the COVID crisis. And through various reports, I think that's a testament to the fact that by all other metrics, we had a very strong economy going into COVID. And hopefully our businesses will really bounce back and be very strong. 60.9% said that they were not concerned that they would close permanently. And I think that is a very key metric for us to look at here in Christian County. But yet we have a gap. So if they are not going to close, we have to look at how do we actively solve some of these capital concerns so that we can keep cash flowing in our business community. And then we also saw about 30% of those said that they are somewhat concerned it could go either way. So even combined, I thought that this was a very positive and encouraging metric when you look at our community as a whole, that over half of our economy and our business community to date said that they plan on staying open through COVID. So things that you can do to, again, really bulletproof your business. We are working on a plan at Show Me Christian County to come up with a resiliency certification program, and we hope to have more details to you in the coming months about what that program could look like, things on how do you better understand your operating cycle, how can you maximize your cash flow so that you can put more cash into your business and save that for that rainy day or that internal resilience fund. But immediately there are some things that you can be doing. And if you have not already found this resource, the state of Missouri has put together a Missouri PPE marketplace. And the Department of Economic Development put this together with Google to put this in place. And it's really been something to connect those PPE suppliers with vendors across Missouri that need that to get active and back to work. And so you can find direct links to that through our website at showmeccmo.com. You can also find this at ded.mo.gov. I also encourage you to have a printed plan in place, and our chambers have done a great job about highlighting some marketing professionals on how to get your business out there and also get your messaging out there on how you're responding and how you can make sure that people are safe when they come into your doors, and really lessening the chances and lessening your liability. So again, reach out to us if you have specific questions in this and how to bulletproof your business and how to move forward. Lastly, I told you we want to look at job postings. And so these are job postings that are on various online resources. Again, a jobs board is something that we've seen a need for, and hopefully we'll be able to move into this space in the coming months, specifically for the county. But when we look at the state as a whole, The dark blue line is our job postings from a total sector. And then we have education and health services, again, an industry that employs a lot of our individuals here in the county. And then also financial sector. And financial and insurance is one of the top 5 largest sectors in our county. So when you look at that as compared to, again, early January, total job postings are down about 21%, but we are starting to see that as an increasing in trend. And education and health services sector is down, but that will bounce back as more people start to go and get some of those elective procedures. And the financial sector, while they are down 42.4%, at least on this graph, they are seeing the sharpest increase as far as recent weeks from the time that the stimulus checks started to the end of April when this data is available. Then when you look at job postings by education level, this is in how much education someone needs in order to apply for a position. So when you look at this and the job postings that are available, we see a very strong increase in those that are either need some education or need minimal education. And that is, again, from about the middle of April on, showing, again, with the consumer spending trends that our service businesses and service sectors were really ramping up. Those are traditionally the industries that have a higher number of those jobs where you need either minimal or some job experience or education. So when we look at this, we really want to prepare our residents all across the county for how they can skill up. Gaining a vocation and really being able to add that next level of education to your toolbox really helps ensure that you are very versatile as these jobs begin to come available. And that's why we're very excited for our webinar next week. We will be hosting key leaders from Ozarks Technical Community College on our webinar for upskilling in the post-COVID-19 world. And Dr. Jeff Yocums is the president of the Richwood Valley campus and assisted us in gaining our speakers for next week. We will also have Dr. Tracy McGrady, who serves as the Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at OTC, and also Dr. Matthew Hudson, who is the Executive Dean of Career, Technical, and Community Development for OTC. And we're really looking forward to their time. This will be on Friday, so it will be a little different than our other regularly scheduled webinars. So please stay tuned for information, and if you want to register for that, you can always email us at info@showmeccmo.com for those details. That again will be Friday, May 22nd at 10 a.m. So with that, that is the data that we had pulled for your presentation today on looking at consumer spending and our trends. Happy to try to answer any questions that you may have as far as how we are predicting Christian County will respond, and I'm happy to take those now. So Sarah, have we had any questions come through from our Facebook Live page or from our chat today?
I have not seen any questions, just some positive feedback of being grateful for this data and looking forward to hearing more about it. Sabrina with the Missouri Job Center did mention in our Zoom chat she'd be interested in the numbers on home improvement spending. She said she's seeing nothing but new roofs and new landscaping projects around her neighborhood, so might be something we'd be able to look into in the future, but not seeing any other questions as of right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is an important point to note. So because construction was deemed as an essential industry, we did not really see a decline. And we regularly check in and have bi-weekly meetings with the planning and zoning departments for both Nixa and Ozark. And both of those departments said it's business as usual. We have seen the same number of permits, if not more, through COVID than we did before. So yes, people are absolutely still building homes. And I think that's important because, as we mentioned, people that have been in very close quarters in metro areas will want to be in more suburban and rural areas. And we have a lot to benefit from that here as a county perspective. So definitely great to know. I've seen, let's see, a couple other chats come through. Appreciate all the positive feedback. And Sarah, if we don't have any questions, that's all I have for today. So I'll check in with you one more time.
Nope, no other questions.
Okay, perfect. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in today. On behalf of Sarah and I, we are so grateful to serve you here in this capacity in Christian County, we are extremely passionate about the work that we do, because we genuinely love our business community here. And so if you have questions as you go through this, if you still need clarification on PPE loans or different things and how we can help support you, please reach out to us at our website, showmeccmo.com, or email info@showmeccmo.com. And we look forward to continuing to serve you as we reopen and reemerge from COVID-19. So with that, I'll sign off. Stay well, and we'll talk to you soon.